11th WellPAC meeting, and before we start our agenda, Erica is going to introduce our new Watershed manager.
Yes, so everybody, this is Danielle Olson. She's our new Watershed manager, working for Auburn Water and Lewiston Water. She started a couple weeks ago and has a background in watershed management. She worked for Pennsylvania Rural Water, is it authority or association? Association, doing watershed management for the state of Pennsylvania, and then was working for Maine Farmland Trust as their chief of staff before she came over and joined us. So we're very excited to have her. Maybe we could do commissioner introductions just so she could get to know everybody as well.
Kevin Gagne, we met earlier. Welcome. Excited to have you aboard.
Camille Parrish, a representative for Auburn.
Amy Landry, I'm the executive director here at AVCOM.
I'm Bruce Damon, I'm representing Lewiston.
I'm Glenn Holmes, I represent Buckfield, Hebron, and Minot.
My name's Alan Holbrook, I represent the town of Turner.
What?
Rephrase the question.
Who else is in the room?
Evan Sear, that's as much as I'll say right now.
Dan Billito, ditto with him.
Hi, I met you yesterday.
We're guests.
Okay.
John Blaze from the city of Auburn.
I'm Steve Beal. I'm on the woodlot in the upper end of Auburn. We're the entertainment for the afternoon.
Well, it's great to meet you all. Thanks so much.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you and glad you joined us.
Thank you.
This PowerPoint might mean something to you someday.
Probably not today.
All right, so the first thing on our agenda is the presentation from John Blaze. So, John, we'll just turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. I've got Steve Beal here. He's going to do probably the first 3 or 4 slides. But I just want to go over the agenda real quickly and roles and responsibilities. Steve will cover that, the resolve. Steve will cover that language. Review the changes. So at a high level, what are we doing here? We're just basically going over what we did for updates to the septic ordinance that relate to Lake Auburn watershed, and all the other things that are around that. We'll go through each one of those. I've been given clear direction that we want to try to condense this. There's a lot on you guys' table today that you got to cover. So I'll go through the bullet points. If anybody on the board wants to drill into something, we've got the information here. We can just go to the page and we'll drill into it and we'll cover that. Besides the stuff that specifically Steve's going to cover. And then at the end, kind of like where we should be thinking, where the city is thinking, where the Watershed Commission should be thinking. These are some of the things we've got to kind of vet out through the inspection program as you'll learn about it as we go. Steve.
Thank you, John. I'm here because I was a member of the subgroup that worked on the drafting of the septic and inspection parts of this large ordinance change. There was another subgroup of which Camille was a member, which worked on agriculture and forestry, and that was a bit behind our group's work, and so that's come before the planning board last night for a workshop and will be before the council shortly. On this subgroup that we were working on the septic and inspection component, Erica was a member, Dan Billito was a member, and Mike was a member, I was a member, John was a member, and the 6th member was John Cleveland, who's not the only one of the group who's not here. Anyway, I think rather than beginning with roles and responsibilities, I'd like to talk about the resolve first, which is second on your agenda listing, and particularly the last couple of paragraphs of the resolve, because that's what this discussion here today is about. The City Council of the City of Auburn is calling upon the Watershed Protection Commission to institute a program to perform without charge the subsurface wastewater treatment system inspections within the Lake Auburn Watershed Overlay District pursuant to the ordinance that's been enacted which the city of Auburn has the authority to do. That's covered in all of those whereas clauses previously. And then the second of those resolutions calls upon the Auburn Water District and the City of Lewiston Water Division to provide adequate appropriations to the Watershed Protection Commission to fund a program to perform this inspection program within the Watershed Overlay District. Now, why is the Auburn City Council calling upon the Watershed Protection Commission to do these things? Because the Auburn City Council doesn't have the authority to order the Watershed Protection Commission to do anything. They're separate bodies. Auburn has 3 votes on this panel, but it cannot, the city of Auburn can't direct this panel to do anything. It can direct the planning board in Auburn to consider ordinance changes, map changes. It did both of those things. The map and the text have been changed, but now in order to get some actual meat on the bones, somebody has to put together a program to engage inspectors, to set up a set of territories within which these inspections are to be done on, and we've got a calendar for that as part of the presentation. And then the city of Auburn can enforce its own ordinances, but it, again, can't direct other entities to do things that it doesn't have the authority to do. So there are lots of people with different areas of responsibility and have different roles in all of this process. And that's on your second page of your agenda here. Every parcel of land with a septic system on it has got an owner of the parcel of land. That individual is not actually listed here. But the licensed plumbing inspector of the city of Auburn has got the responsibility for actually issuing a septic permit. In order to get a permit, you have to have a site evaluator for a new system, do a site evaluation of that land and make an affirmative recommendation that it would be appropriate to site a septic system on that parcel. For existing systems, this inspection program that's been set up in a 5-year system will largely involve certified septic system inspectors for existing systems. You don't have to have a site evaluator, but there are people with, I guess I would characterize it as slightly less demands of qualification who are available to do those septic inspections and sign off that this system already in existence qualifies or fails, and report that information to the licensed plumbing inspector and to the Protection Commission as well. This commission is charged with the overall responsibility of guarding and enhancing the quality of the lake. The Auburn Water and Sewer Districts are responsible for provision for the Water District of public drinking water to those in the city of Auburn who consume public water. And the Sewer District is responsible for the appropriate disposal of the public waste within the city sewer system. The Lewiston Water Department, or the Water Division of the Lewiston Public Works Department, correctly put, is responsible for the provision of safe drinking water to the citizens of Lewiston. Auburn, as most of you all know, I'm sure, does have an additional extension of its surface area into Poland, but it does not have ordinance enforcement authority beyond the boundaries of the city of Auburn, which has been the subject of some discussion in the past, and there's been an opinion of legal counsel rendered to that effect. And I guess the final thing I'll say by way of introduction is that the considerations of the types of systems that are in the watershed, public and private, for both water and sewer, are almost entirely mutually exclusive. If you look at this little list on the bottom of this page 2, you will see that this was as of a couple of months ago when I got the data from Mike. There are 6,473 Auburn water services in the entire city for providing public water, but only 41 of those are in the watershed. almost all of those gathered and clustered in East Auburn area. Similarly, there are 5,784 public sewer services in the entire city, and of course there are more customers than there are services, because most services will serve a family of 2.5, 3, 4 people. And of those 5,784 public sewer services, there are only 22 of them in the watershed, and one of those is the J-Lynn Trailer Park, which has got 50 separate inputs into it. So almost exclusively, there are private water supplies and private septic systems in the watershed, and almost exclusively, but not quite, there are public services for both water and sewer outside the watershed, with only a very minuscule overlap of public services in the watershed for both water and sewer. So that's the end of my remarks. There's a ton of studies and reports. This report went through 15 drafts and numerous reviews and revisions. And some people who were not on the drafting group actually made some good contributions. Evan made a very good point at one of the meetings, that there was all this discussion about private residential septic systems, but we didn't have anything included at that point that would cover commercial or other non-residential properties. So we added some language to make sure that those were covered. So that's my introductory, and John will give some of the more technical details about the components of the ordinance and components of systems.
And I guess before we get going, any questions regarding what Steve just covered? All right.
Could I just one clarification? When you say there are 50 inputs at the J-Lynn Park, are those 50 inputs going into the public sewer?
Yes,
One large pipe which is above ground.
not the entire pipe. There's only one small.
Some part of it,
Some
Right.
part of it.
the part that can freeze.
And then that's part of the public water, the sewer system?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm really gonna, why more changes? I'm just gonna cover this, just to kind of keep it short. Just to give you a little bit of background, a lot of the changes that happened with the update.
It's over there.
It's supposed to be low.
My keys are in my truck and they're not driving away, so.
You go with your keys in your
Yeah,
truck.
they're in it.
Very trusted.
They always are.
Oh, now it's on like a second. What do you hit?
If we can get everybody's going.
I'll go check. You guys are in there.
Okay.
Yeah, mine don't.
Give us the report.
Mine can't do that. It's not me. I get old tech.
I've never used my alarm system.
I haven't
I don't
either.
have my keys on me, so I know it's mine.
Nothing's pulsating on mine.
Oops, stop.
Been at it.
Sounds like it was Evan.
At you, bud.
Stop. All right, the first bullet, basically, I think Steve Beal covered most of this, January 20. This was basically a presentation that we had given to the planning board and then later to council for some information. Explains the Lake Auburn stakeholders group, the working groups that were involved in all of this, how many times we met. It says 6 here on this PowerPoint, it was more than that. I can attest to that. So, and then the order. So the first bullet here that really means anything to anyone is that we updated the definitions in the phosphorus calculations to recognize as changes in zoning. We had Maine DEP review a lot of these numbers. And then we also introduced some of the single-family residential lot standards for phosphorus control. So that's what that was. Again, we introduced the Technical Design Manual, Volume 3. These are all just updates that the state has in reference to designing phosphorus control in the watershed. As or if anybody knows, 200 square feet really of new impervious area on any lot, any given area, pushes you into the requirement of getting a phosphorus control plan. So given the design engineers or sometimes city staff, if it's a small project, some criteria to go by, these are the standards. Volume 2 and Volume 3 is what the reference manuals of DEP that we need. So we just updated that language. Again, the single family home, the phosphorus control standard, that is a low impact development technique. It really focuses on using buffers. Another change that we did was in the low density country residential. As you know, we changed all the rural res to low country, so from 1 lot to 3 lot.
1 acre to 3.
1 acre to 3 acre, thank you. And then, but the setback was, typically in the city, it's 50 feet in LDCR, and we changed that to 25. So again, to minimize the opportunity for impervious areas. So that was a change that we did. We added a bunch of definitions for building, dwelling units, LPI as a licensed plumbing inspector, HWL as high water line, site evaluator. Steve touched on that and actually talked about some of the definitions of that today. A stream or a brook, and then subsurface wastewater inspector. So that's the certified inspector that Steve was referencing. And then the requirements for subsurface wastewater regardless of the type of development. So we did change earlier we changed going from 36 inches of horizontal separation to 12 inches and then adding the media. So we just made that language a little bit more clear. We gave examples of that and how that's done. And then also the inspection program on that. We set up a 400-foot resource setback map that staff uses for septic systems. We included curtain drain language from the drinking water program. DWP is the drinking water program. So they were worried about the curtain drain absorbing the effluent from the drain field, from the septic field itself. So they wanted to make sure that there was language that there's hydraulic separation between the two, so that there wouldn't be any connectivity, so we're not getting any waste into the, would be supposed to be just taking up clean groundwater. That's the role of a curtain drain or a diversion ditch, is to take up clean groundwater so it doesn't impact the drain field itself. So that is a requirement in the watershed. We either have to have a diversion ditch or a curtain drain. So that's as the Watershed Commission reviews all of our septic plans that we have. That's a criteria that your third-party inspector should be paying attention to look for. Just kind of a note there. Then we had the inspection program rollout. We're gonna talk in a little bit more detail of this today, and then a map rollout of. We have a year 1, year 2, year 3 map in here. We could take a look at that, and then we added some enforcement language on the back end to make sure that our LPIs and our code enforcement folks have the teeth to really implement and enforce these rules that we put. And then finally, updates to setbacks to align with the SLZ, the shoreland zone. We had small language there, very good language. I don't remember even in my career was setback was 75 feet, but we just extended that to 100 feet for structures. So that's a highlight of what we did for this first go around. We just, we presented last night on the ags portion of it to planning board. I think we've got looks good to go on that as well. So happy to come back and update the commission on those updates too. But any questions that we have that are highlighted here that you want to drill into? We look at a map or anything else? Or
I just want to add one other couple of comments, John. This ordinance did get amended last year at the last meeting of the old Auburn City Council on December 4th. But even at the time that they were doing that, the council recognized that it was not close to perfect, because they adopted a resolve in that same meeting that said, we hereby direct the planning board to reconsider this matter and come back to us with further proposals for further amendment. Originally by the end of April, worked into May for this part of it, and then because of a problem with the Forest Service, it was longer for the agriculture and forestry parts of it. But, so this is a further revision of something that got done last year. And when we really started to look at it in depth early this year, we realized that there were a lot of things that were just missing. Like if you've got an ordinance that defines the watershed area and you don't have a definition of a dwelling unit, for example, or what a clear cut is, just to take two illustrations, then you're going to be guessing, and your ordinance is likely to be declared by a court void for vagueness, is the buzz phrase. So that's why there are a lot of new definitions as well as some other things. And the other idea was to make the responsibility for doing things lie with parties that have that responsibility. The City of Auburn enforces ordinances. The Auburn Water District, under the former revision, had some assumed responsibilities that it was in no position to do, let alone not have the people to do it. So we tried to put responsibilities where they could lie, but the big problem is who is actually going to set up and do these inspections initially to get this 5-year program accomplished. And that's what the City of Auburn doesn't have the authority to order this commission to do, but we're in fact asking the commission to do with some money that's already been obtained by Auburn Water District and Water Division of the Lewiston Public Works Department, but to use that for this introductory purpose.
I thought we heard at the last meeting that that money can't be used for actual inspection, it can only be used for education.
Correct.
that's correct.
And outreach. Can be used for outreach.
Yep. Education outreach.
Right, but you can't actually do the work.
Correct.
No, but the party who is in that position, if there is a person hired to do that, whether an employee or a contracted person, could, if that person had grant writing skills, could seek that kind of money to actually do inspections.
Sorry, but there's no money to actually do the inspection.
Not at this moment, no.
And we're being asked to do this at no cost to the septic system owner.
You're being asked in the first instance to seek some money from Auburn Water District and Lewiston and the Water Division of Lewiston Public Works. Frankly, this is personally just my personal opinion. It's hoped that whoever is in this position on the commission's role could actively perhaps seek some other grants.
Yeah, so any questions about the information that I covered though before we do have some slides that cover some of these questions that you have. But is there any additional questions that you want to drill in for that the commission has any questions about the ordinance or anything like that, clarifications?
I asked you today about, this came up at our last special commission meeting, this 330 septic systems that have been identified. Does that number include the private sewer service lines that are within the watershed? Like, so those 22 sewer customers of the district, are their service lines part of that number?
No, they're not part of they're not part of this initial, it's the last sheet that you have on your, I put together a septic inspection cost worksheet. This was something that I did for, I believe planning board and then later for council as we thought about what the yearly cost might be. And then there's an asterisk here. Year one includes Jalen Park, but the number of inspections, those are the number of specific inspections for private property, so that's not clear. You know, I guess I'll take the, you know, that responsibility that was, it's certainly not clear, but those are 50 individual inspections, and that's counted as one. So all those individual houses that were referenced to that connection is looked at as one connection point.
So there's 49 private subsurface systems, and then one of those is the Jalen trailer park?
That's correct, yep, yep.
Okay.
And we admittedly, you may remember this from the discussion, Mike, we moved Jalen as an entity up from year level 2 or year 2
Yep.
to year 1, just because we considered that to be such
Proximity,
an extreme situation.
Yeah, we did move that to year 1. That's where the asterisk is under number 1. So we are moving that as, and I personally I see that as something that, you know, Mike with his expertise and his staff, we would work together on that. If he came into an issue, a situation that wouldn't be something that we would train anybody necessarily for or hire anybody to do. We would do the inspections, I think, in-house, and we'd cover the enforcement piece at the city level. And the technical piece, I would look to, you know, I do have a background in this, but I would certainly look to the Auburn Sewer and Water District as my technical person, and, you know, because you have your own ordinances and your own processes for connections and things like that, and that might be a little bit different than I'm familiar with. So.
I was just trying to understand the numbers. So like up at the top, there's 330 systems total, but we should add 22 to that for those private services, you know, identified in the watershed.
Yeah, we could do that.
All
We
right.
could do that. And these numbers are all approximate, right? Because there's some lots that we don't exactly have all the information for. So this is the data that we had at that particular time.
The total of these numbers that are total in these 5-year program totals 331. We had one that somehow didn't get in the gross number.
No, one is the J-Link connection.
Okay. Okay. 50 plus 1.
Yeah, the 330 plus 1. Because you got number of septic systems is 330, and the plus 1 is the J-Link connection.
I'm just of the opinion if we're going to throw Jalen into that we should also include the other private service lines that are in the watershed.
Okay, that wasn't on my radar, but we could certainly have that as something that we could inspect and include. But that was in year 1. We identified that location as something that we should look at. Any other questions?
So, based on all the reports we've got and stuff, you know, we have a number of how much phosphorus load septic systems are putting in the system. Is this gonna reduce that number? And do we have any idea what that's gonna reduce it by?
So, yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question. So I think that you gotta look at the overall watershed loading. And I think that the uses within the watershed, that is a part of that. So it's hard to calculate the actual amount of phosphorus that you're gonna take out of the lake. The interesting piece is that you really can't do the calculation or have an estimate now without knowing if there's anything that's failing. You really gotta go out there and you've gotta do the inspections. The inspection will lead to, then you could do, you could use Region 5's model for phosphorus and nitrogen uptake and really calculate that number. I could give you a number per one, each one, based on the land cover types, how close you are in proximity to natural resources, these are all the items that go into that Region 5 calculation sheet that's typically found in 319 reporting. So that's part of the reporting piece. That's on the back end for the city. And there's pretty strong language in here that we need to report that information back to the city council.
Glenn's holding a very dangerous document. One of the...
You gave it to me.
I trust you. One of the parties that did one of the most recent reports, Water Resource Services, the principal of that entity, developed some slides those were not part of his report. That one was not, but it contained an undocumented or unsupported listing of sources of phosphorus in the lake, and it ascribed a very small number of units of kilograms per year to septic systems. And yet it's got in the next category, a category that is identified as basically internal within the watershed system. So Camille and I have talked about that at some length, and there really shouldn't be any identified as septic sources because, as Erica has reported in the past, and it seems to be the general consensus, there are no straight pipes going into Lake Auburn, so you can't say this comes from that defined septic source. But yet you've got 430 kilograms per year of other, so to speak, and the way that that is identified is that is already in the ground septic waste from old failed systems, a great percentage of which is in the northeast quadrant of the watershed, up beyond the thoroughfare. And
Well, we can't take one number without taking the other number. We can't say it's 430 for one and not, and discount the nine.
no,
I mean, you
No.
quoted the 430 watershed load number right then.
yeah, but the best advice from a combination of consultants has been, to the extent that you can, eliminate any new discharge and do the best you can to get rid of that which is already in the lake. There's a great technical study on this topic, which was Evan Ma's thesis that he did at Bates, which I've got back there, which says some very depressing things about how long it will take to get that in-the-ground septic waste phosphorus situation eliminated, because it's from old systems and it migrates slowly toward the lake. And if you stop the new discharge immediately, it will take a long time, decades, to get rid of that migration toward the lake. But you don't want to generate any new discharge to the lake. That's the purpose of restrictive septic ordinance provisions going
And
forward.
I completely understand that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do these things. It's just we spent a lot of time talking about this particular thing, and apparently, according to what we paid money for, I'm assuming, to Mr. Wagner, to provide a report, and he passed out this information. A 3% reduction in the watershed load overall, which might be a different project, would be way more than what this is going to do.
Right, and I think that's why we gotta do the inspections. If you get a failing system and you know it's entering the resource, then that's far worse than any non-point source. That's a point source pollution piece, and you can do some math on that. Right now, I would consider that document high-level planning, high-level scientific planning. It doesn't get into any of the details that you really need to do if you're really going to start calculating any of the true impacts to the lake.
So the dollar estimates that he provided aren't...
I think they're high level. I think they're high level estimates, and I think it's high level planning. He just used available data that we had and made some educated guesses or suggestions that might, overall help the lake. I mean, that's not my, it's not my role here. I understand.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to understand, it's like, the amount of time and money we spent on this particular issue, and it's like there's a lot of other things here appear it would be expensive, but would have a much greater impact faster.
They are enormously more expensive. Dredging the basin is enormously expensive.
Well, that's not the least expensive one, no, but I mean, there are a lot of
Algal
others.
treatments are very expensive.
Well, I would just say that we aren't excluding doing other things for the watershed in terms of if we do the septic inspections, even the first 5 years to see what's failing. I see that as a positive to at least identify if there are failing systems, that we can address those so they aren't continuing to be a source to the watershed. At the same time, we can also look at some of the other things that, Ken Wagner recommended to us. So I don't think it's like one or the other, but I appreciate,
It seems
what
like
you're
we're spending,
bringing
we
out.
spent a ton of time on this, and I haven't heard a lot about the other ones in these meetings.
Oh,
I can give you Evan's
we will
thesis.
definitely talk about those then. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think part of those discussions, Erica, they did a nice job on an updated watershed-based plan. I mean, that's the baseline of that information. That spearheads the additional 319 monies and the additional work that gets done. And I think we got DOT's attention on some of these projects. That's a big, we know is a big, pollution site. So there is work at that. There's been a lot of additional conversations and a lot of more awareness, I think, that people are talking more openly about it. I don't have a long history here, 10 years or anything like that, but it feels like we're talking about all of the issues holistically more. This is just one item that we're talking about today because we were asked to talk about it, and we got to kind of lay it out for the the planning of this ordinance and try to get this inspection underway.
I think we can say, Glenn, at least I will say, this is my personal view, that in at least one of these inspection areas, there's going to be a very high percentage of failures. There's a lot of 50 to 75-year-old, poorly made, poorly installed systems in a very sensitive area.
I think the next step, if I may, the commission at the last meeting decided to put together a subcommittee, which we've done. And, this is kind of the first piece, understanding what the requirement or the ask of the commission is. Now we need to sit down and figure out and map out how we would accomplish these goals. Here's the fixed cost. There's other costs to figure out. Okay, we did get 40 grand in source water protection grants for education outreach. How do we map that spending out? What do we build with that? And then there's other costs that we need to look at as far as managing fixed costs of the inspections as the inspections come in, as systems are found to be failed, the continued communication on those and management of the data. I think the subcommittee needs to kind of do that and map how you would do the bid process and select a licensed inspector, how the data is going to be collected and shared, and then we can bring that back to the commission and say, okay, here's all the costs. It's fixed cost of, if it's $21,000 to $33,000 a year, and there's also, we can modify, job duties and responsibilities of staff to manage data, collect data, do education outreach. There's those costs as well, and then the commissioners can decide at what level they'll fund this or do this, or maybe it's 100%, go ahead. I don't.
The last sheet that we were just looking at, the costs worksheet, but then to add to Mike's conversation, I just put some thoughts down, who's involved and, what's the city gonna do, what's the landowners are gonna do, what's LawPac gonna do, what's a private contractor, what could they do, what's the Auburn Sewer and Water District, Lewiston Sewer and Water Division, I guess, not department. So, these are the roles that from a city perspective and somebody that's trying to implement the ordinance, these are some of the roles that I thought people would be doing. And I don't see any one entity doing this in a vacuum, that we've worked together all the time and be side by side on this. Excited about the training opportunity, the training program for the inspection. we say certified inspectors by the state, but there's so many different rules that we have here in the watershed. I think there has to be some training about that too as well. So we include not only the baseline of inspection for the state, but we have the state standards and we do that. Steve wanted me to bring in my jar of sand and I got caught with a customer the last minute and I was late and I wanted to bring it, but we're thinking about, what the media looks like and what does the silt analysis look like? What is the proper information or material that needs to go in these septic systems? We're working towards that, the city's working towards that. Want to be part of the training, want to be part of the solution on that, so. And then, if it's, as we write the rules up, there's some rules about this, but then we've got to think about the state's, I say the states, because the code enforcement always refers back to state timeline. If we find a septic system that's failing, they've got to have a corrective action in place within 10 days, and then they've got to implement things in a certain amount of time, and that's the order of business is Title 30A, Part 2, Chapter 161, subsection 3428. That's the specifics that kind of guides if we're running into a problem, how do we deal with it? So as we develop the program, as we write the SOPs, we got to think about that stuff. Hiring the inspector, Mike mentioned that, or I don't know I think this is a commission decision. Are they going to hire somebody to work in-house and train them, or are they going to hire a contractor?
But there are plenty of certified site evaluators in the first instance, and plenty of septic inspectors in our region.
Again, we can let our subcommittee get into those details, but.
Yeah. And then set up a timeline. But the timeline is, we talked about this at planning board, and we talked about this at council. I think that the council is going to take an active role in the letters, and then providing those letters to all the individuals in the watershed, providing all the HHE 200. There's very specific language in our ordinance that it's required for us to do that. You've got to ask anything that you need. It's in the ordinance that the city does have to provide that to you. So I guess this sheet right here, it really kind of gets the thoughts going as the committee kind of gets down into the details, and certainly we don't mind being part of that discussion. And then obviously implementing, setting up public outreach letters, septic socials. I think Glenn was talking about the money. I think that part of it, right, Erica, could be used as something that we could spend money on and setting up the program and getting that going. And then, corrective action plan provided by the inspector, and then the follow-up, implementing the plan, and then the compliance, and then the yearly reporting is up to the city. And the enforcement piece is done by the city, so.
Yeah.
I think this is just kind of maybe 5,000 foot, I'm sure it needs to get down to 1,000, but this is kind of high level thinking of bullet points that we gotta kind of figure out and do over the next few months.
Can I just add to that? Well, probably should add an order of business, figuring out how we're collecting all that information and storing it, disseminating it.
Right, so Mike had mentioned, and again, it's in our ordinance, GIS is critical, it's gotta be part of this. I don't know if it lives in the GIS for the city or if it lives at LAPAC, but it's in the ordinance, it has to be in GIS, there has to be a database there, so that is a good point, Erica, we get it, we do.
The provision regarding the inspection reports requires that they be shared with LAPAC
Yes.
and the licensed plumbing inspector.
Yep.
So the city will have that data by into the ordinance.
We've got a plan for that. Again, it's just details that the subcommittee can hash
Sure.
out and certainly make you guys a part of that.
Anything?
Any additional questions before?
Was that helpful, or?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
I feel smarter already.
You do?
Can I ask you, John, is the city council expecting a response from the commission from this resolve?
It's not exactly part of a resolve to anticipate one, but I'm sure they would very much appreciate knowing, other than just by an informal comment from John or myself. Yeah, a response in writing from the commission to the council would be appreciated.
So year one started July 1,
Ah.
24.
No,
No,
No.
That's-
It is, no.
That's a change, it got made.
Yeah.
there's
Uh,
no specific
There
date.
were, we drafted this and had it done by the end of May, but then there was various procedural things. So the planning board wanted to defer year one of the start date from July 1, 2024 to July 1, 2025. The council did not, the planning board adopted that position. The council did not adopt that position and instead changed the dates from a specific date, July 1, 2024, dash June 30, 2025, to year one, year two.
Just
So
wanted to confirm the
whenever we
actual
want,
start date, if that had been established or not.
And there is, in your PowerPoint, there is a map that.
I have that in the
highlights.
schedule, it talks about year
You're
1
in-
through 5.
you're-
Yeah.
everything
Just didn't say when year one
miraculously
is.
quickly.
Didn't say when year 1 started, so that's why I'm confirming.
Year one could be September 30th if miracles occur.
There's no money.
That's a miracle.
That's the middle part, yeah. I don't say it's gonna start for next July because we need that money. And it's not cheap, $140,000 over 5 years just for the inspections. And we gotta pay somebody to run it then.
Well, that's policy discussion for the group here.
Well, and of course, the current city, both cities and probably the district's budget too have already been set. So if you're looking for additional funding, I mean, you're gonna probably have to include that in the fiscal year 26.
Well,
request.
Auburn Water District has a separate budget
It's a
from
whole separate
entity from the city of Auburn.
But has the budget been set current for the current year?
It's set for 24, yes.
It's still a
So I
calendar.
mean,
We're a calendar budget, so we would have to put money into 2025
Yeah,
to do this, and obviously we wouldn't want to fund it on our own. We'd want,
right.
you know, if we're gonna pay for this, we would
Yeah,
want
so
reciprocating funds to come from
the city of-
Lewiston, so we'd have, it all has to be figured out. I think it's all work that the subcommittee has to do
Yeah,
before we can make any real decisions on when we do this stuff.
yeah. when we get started.
Because there's the technical part and then there's the financial part.
Right.
right.
And in the last analysis, under this city ordinance, the city does the approvals in the first instance, and the corrective action if in the event of failure. That's the city's function, to enforce its own ordinances. And ultimately, the responsibility for ensuring that an individual plot owner's septic system is functioning correctly lies with the individual owner. Hopefully, there'll be available funds to, in the best of all worlds, totally eliminate that financial cost. But the ultimate responsibility is the property owners.
So does the ordinance require the inspection?
It does.
Whether we do it or not, it has to be inspected. It's on the homeowner at that point.
Yeah,
With no start date,
Right.
except,
You're
what are you,
wrong.
what's the plan for properties that have sold? Because that's not dependent on a start date.
there is routinely now inspections when properties are sold.
And how's that being handled or rolled out? Because that, there's no, the start date when you enacted it is when it started.
Oh, well, if a property had been sold within the previous 5 years, from whenever the start date is, you'd fall into your area by area.
I understand, so it says when a property is sold, so if you're 4.5 years or 3 years into your last inspection, you sell the property, it's gonna get an inspection.
Yeah,
So you haven't started it, but it sounds like the start date is irrelevant. If a property sells in the watershed right now, they should be doing an inspection, they should be turning it into the city of Auburn,
Well-
and that should be happening regardless of year one start date.
well, actually, I think in practical effect that it's going to be necessary to determine when year one begins.
Again, I think those are all questions we need to make as part of that subcommittee and then bring back. And I think there's gonna be a few questions like that we're gonna have to get answers to. I think that's a
the
good one.
regularly scheduled year 1 through year 4 blocks of inspections, that's all planned and scheduled. The random that comes up when a property sells, that's on the property owner.
That's-
Right.
And that sounds like there's no time trigger on our behalf or the
Right.
city of Auburn's
No,
behalf.
it's just on the.
That's
city.
independent, that should be happening
That's-
immediately.
That's correct.
Will happen as a matter of normal real estate practice these days.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
I'll get an answer for you on that, Kevin. I think it's a good point.
I mean, if I'm selling a
There
property,
needs to be-
I'd wanna know.
I think there needs to be some public outreach to the Main State Railroad Association in this local area, so get the word out. I don't think that there's any communication on that yet, to be honest with you, so
Yep. Okay,
that's a good point.
thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice work.
Next in our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment at this time?
As a member of the public,
Yeah.
I've been installing septic systems since the 80s with my parents, mostly my dad. There's a lot of buzz going around West Auburn right now. People are calling me, people are walking their easements, they're looking at their tanks, they're starting to get educated on what's gonna happen. So keep up the good work, because it's the homeowner that really needs to take care of it. Just like their roof, just like their boiler, they can afford a septic system. So don't be too concerned with a little bit of, encouragement from this group to help the city along. I think the homeowners is really gonna, and then when somebody goes on the property to inspect, there's all kinds of other things. They can make recommendations, they can give them a handout. So there's a lot of watershed protection stuff that can happen by this going through. So that's my comments from the public.
May I make a public comment now?
Yes.
At the council meeting, when this ordinance was approved, a fellow stood up and said, I live in the watershed fairly close to the lake, but I have a private well and private septic system, and I'm not on public water, and I shouldn't have to pay any kind of cost for any of this inspection business. Well, when you step back a few feet and take the broader look at it, you've got virtually all the people who are drinking public water from a public water source approved and chartered by the Maine State Legislature, who are dependent on having clean water by virtue of non-polluting that lake by people with septic systems, almost all of whom don't drink the public water. So you've got one small, relatively small group of 330 or so septic system owners who are potentially could damage the drinking water resource of, in Auburn, 15,000 people, and more in Lewiston, and a few in Pullman. So it's not, when you step back and look at it, an undue burden on a private property owner to ask him to take reasonable steps not to pollute a public water resource.
Yes.
All right, so I guess I'll introduce myself. So Evan is here. Yeah, I guess I think my opinion sitting on this side of the table is that it would make sense that LawPAC would do something like this. It's sort of surprising that LawPAC probably didn't already have some sort of at least educational outreach around septics EPA actually suggests every 3 years, and we're looking at every 5 years. So we're actually looking at we're looking at less even than what's suggested. So it makes sense that LawPEC would do something like this. I think what Dan was saying makes sense with regard to being able to get your foot in the door, and if you can get your foot in the door, then you've got more opportunity to provide education. My concern would be that LawPEC would develop a program that it just can't administer currently. There's just not the staff to be able to administer a larger program unless LawPAC chooses to invest and hire more staff. I guess I also kind of, it raises a question for me about if the city of Auburn is, responsible for the rulemaking, responsible for the data collection, responsible for notification, responsible for enforcement, it kind of makes you wonder exactly how deep in a third-party entity should get. That would be LawPEC. And so I guess I just kind of throw out that you guys will hear from the subcommittee, but consider that educational piece as really an important piece here, and make funds available for individuals. I think LawPAC's going to have to decide whether they want to make funds available for anybody for any inspection, if it's only the 5-year inspections of point of sale, is it for is it for someone who lives in a $500,000 house and is quite comfortable living there within their means, or is it right, or is that going to be focused towards helping folks that for whom would be a higher financial burden? I think it makes sense that at the very least there would be a mechanism to help folks pay for the inspection, right? But there's been a lot of questions asked with regard to, I heard questions about whether the line from the house to the public sewer, right, whether that's getting inspected. So there's just a lot of questions, and it seems like a place that LawPEC would really want to get involved, but I guess from where I'm sitting, I would worry that LawPEC might inadvertently involve themselves in a way that creates a certain level of liability that it didn't need to create for itself. Whether there are avenues for LawPEC to be involved, help create financial incentives for people to be doing the right thing in the watershed, but then also really be acting as sort of like your friendly neighborhood helper, not your sort of inspector coming in and telling me what you need to do. So that's kind of what I was thinking after hearing this discussion.
Thank you. Up to the public comment. Any additional comment? All right, thank you so much. Next on our agenda is the minutes. I saw that, I think, was it you, Bruce, who had a correction?
Yeah, Dan wasn't here.
Yeah.
So
Correction.
Yeah, and I've already corrected that on my
Okay.
original draft. So,
All
yep.
right.
only thing I saw.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the 8/14/2024 minutes?
So moved.
By
I'll
Glenn,
second.
seconded by Bruce. All those in favor?
Does that just change, so where it says past 9-0, is it actually 8-0? For any
The last
motion?
meeting.
What?
The last meeting.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, there was one absent, so I'll have to fix all the votes. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So, but then, that additional amendment, is there still approval? Any dissent? All right, so unanimously approved with those corrections, thank you. We have the consent agenda, the financial report.
I mean, with the consent agenda be approved.
Is there a
I'd like-
second?
Second for discussion.
Second for Kevin. The discussion of the,
Tracy's here, I'd like to
Yep.
kind of hear where we're at
Okay.
versus processing them on our own.
yeah,
So we met yesterday, Erica, Mike, and Danielle, and went over looking at the budget and discussions of the septic system and the cost and what we're gonna look at for putting into the budget. So we're just starting to review where we're at currently to go forward and what we'll have left over for fund balance after the carry forward that's on this year's budget. So currently looking at where we are at, we're doing good. Everything's in. I only have one invoice on my desk and one check. And we have a balance due of revenues of $72,000 as of August. And for expenditures, we still have $99,000 that we budgeted that has not been spent in the operating. So currently, we're doing really good. Revenues coming in, expenses are remaining lower. So we're watching that closely, and we're gonna work on the budget closely to make sure we get it to you guys at the next meeting for our draft. Any questions?
I guess a question for contributions from Auburn Water District and Lewiston Water Division. Do those contributions come in on a sometime scale
So-
during the year or something?
Auburn Water comes in monthly. So
Okay.
we receive theirs monthly. Lewiston, because we are on a fiscal year, the portion that was remaining got moved in before the end of June, and then the next portion will be sent. So usually we'll do those in 2 lump sums
Okay,
instead of monthly for
Okay.
Lewiston.
thank you. Other questions for Tracy?
Do we have the funds shown? Do we need to give the funds that we received from the state? Do we need to
We didn't get money from the state, it's reimbursement funds.
reimbursement only?
Yep, so we have to pay that out, and then when we're done with the program, we submit for reimbursement.
And how are we bringing that into this entity?
That's something we're trying to work on. We had our first budget discussion yesterday, and we've got to kind of map that out, and again, try to pull this all together.
I've done that before in the past right, it's the water utilities who were recipients of the funds.
Right.
And then I would submit for reimbursement. And then when the check in the past had gone to Auburn, I would let them know, when you get this, it needs to go to Tracy.
Okay. And then has the clock started? Like, is there a deadline to spend the funds?
Usually, I have to look at
You
that.
get like a year and a half,
Usually it's a year and a half to start.
and yes, the clock is
But you
started.
can request an extension.
But Danielle's here, so.
Right,
Woo-hoo.
yeah. You can request extensions.
Okay,
Yeah, they've been flexible.
great. Maybe. I don't have any questions. Thanks, Glenn.
All right, can we now vote for a motion to pass for the consent agenda? All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, unanimous approval. The next on the agenda is water quality and watershed report. Erica? I assume this will eventually be Danielle.
Yes, I will be passing this on, but for this meeting I can go over it. I guess the highlight to report is that we've had really good water quality in the lake all open water season so far, all through the summer. We did not see a typical seasonal change with increase in turbidity in late July, early August. It's been stable. We didn't start to see, a lot of algae growth, which is great. So we're happy with that. Nothing really negative to report on that end. There are turbidity and temperature graphs included. Looking at the in-lake phosphorus data, which I know I've said this, but I'll say it again. We do our in-lake testing and tributary sampling. We collect phosphorus, or samples for phosphorus, send that out, but the state turnaround time, the lab that we use is typically delayed. So I don't have up to date today data to report. So I think it went back to maybe June or July. In-lake phosphorus has stayed fairly low this summer, which is great. Tributary phosphorus readings were kind of all over the place. We saw high readings where we typically see high readings. We haven't had a ton of rain this summer, and sometimes when it's been relatively dry, and then we might get a big storm coming through that can push a lot of nutrients through. So sometimes we see elevated readings due to that. But again, in the lake, it's remained low, which is what we like to see. As far as watershed activity, I don't have a ton to report. Again, I'll be handing this over to Danielle, but just this summer, our USDA wildlife biologists have been working to disperse the gulls and geese on the lake. We did see quite a few, good populations of waterfowl around the lake this summer when I was still there. So they've been working steadily to mitigate that problem. Again, good water quality, and Danielle was here and started a couple weeks ago, so I don't have a ton more to report because things have been good. We will be looking to hire an education and outreach coordinator at some point here. We've worked on the job description this past year about looking at making that full-time, and I think that's just something to consider, is that the septic inspection program, whichever way we go with it, if that's something that the commission takes on, that is going to take staff time, and I think that position as a full-time position could really work on getting the messaging out, contacting homeowners, however that process rolls out. I think they could play a part in that, and so that's just kind of my pitch, to have that role be full-time so we can have somebody and hopefully retain somebody too. It's hard with it as a part-time position without benefits. And I think that would be a great support role for Danielle. Any questions on the water quality or watershed?
What is the status of the Blanchard Pond work?
So I'm going to pass that on to Danielle. They were going through permitting, so that actual construction will probably go to next year. I don't know if you've heard this, but Maine DEP permit, yeah, they're permitting. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they are months and months behind. Yeah, in our Lewiston's case, a year behind processing environmental permits. Wow. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's a staffing situation. I think that's what it is. So, what would normally take maybe a couple of months is now taking a year. Wow. Yeah, unfortunately. So I had been working with Time Bound on that. They had their plan set ready to go, and so I do need to follow up with them and kind of make that connection and introduce Danielle to them, but that's where it's at. Any other questions? Okay, all right.
So next is a motion to go into executive session. Anyone like to make?
I'll make a motion under 1 MRSA 4056B to go executive session for discussion of negotiation of potential land transfer.
Second.
All those in favor?
This should be.
Thank you. We'll ask the public to leave while we have.
Steve is going to get Dan and Evan. They were outside.
Yeah, but they had no idea it was going to be that quick. Not on our historical. Well, see, when they're not in,
You can make
You can connect those dots if you want.
Oh, well, I'll ask him later.
They're coming.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to authorize the clerk,
Yes.
yeah,
That's
clerk
right.
to move forward with the land transaction based on conversation in executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Unanimous approval. Thank you all. Next on our...
Motion to adjourn.
That's a non-debatable motion.
I retract.
Next are clerk and staff reports. Mike?
All right, yeah, thank you. I'll be brief with this. First, I'd like to thank everybody that was able to come out to the Measuring of the Lake. It was a nice event. Water District thanks you all, and thank you for your service. I'd also like to say, I know we all acknowledge that, Evan and Dan have set themselves to the side in this meeting, and the reason for that is the Water District acknowledges there are some procedural concerns with its recent appointment of the two commission seats. Under the advisement of our legal counsel, the trustees will re-vote on these appointments at our trustees meeting on September 8th, 2024, next week.
18th.
I'm sorry, 18th, yes. 18th. So next week we will be re-voting on this. So again, I appreciate everybody's patience with that, but that's what we're doing. So, and thank you to both of you for putting up with all this. It's not been easy. So, but we're going to get it right.
Anything else, Mike?
Outside of that, things are good. We don't have a lot of operational things going on in the watershed. The Auburn Water District is going to be replacing the dam boards on the outlet dam sometime in the next couple of weeks. So we do have a plate made up so that we could blank off the dam and essentially dewater between the plate and the boards and get those replaced. Lewiston bought the boards like 5 years ago, and we have them. They were well preserved. They're in good shape. So we're going to be installing those in the coming weeks. So in case anybody sees activity there, that's what's going on. So we do need to find a permanent plan for the vegetation control around that dam. It is out of control. Seems like every time we try to go there, it's just jungle. And we do all this work clearing it, and you blink and it's back. So we're going to have to come up with some sort of, get it onto some sort of routine mowing list or something, because it is ridiculous how quickly that just gets entangled. And it's not something we really want trees and roots growing into that embankment and jeopardizing that outlet. So that's all I had from a staff perspective. It's great to have Danielle on board and working with Eric and I, and we're ready to get going on a lot of stuff. So that's all I have.
Erica?
I'm just going to, if it's okay with the commissioners, pull this item B from old business up. Tracy did have to leave for another meeting. So we had listed there water hauler funds available. And so Tracy pulled that dollar amount, and in that fund we have $21,573.43. And at our last meeting, we had discussed using that money as a new water filling location for bulk water haulers. As many of you know, bulk water haulers used to pull directly from Lake Auburn, and they would pay us a fee for that. That would go into our Watershed Protection Commission. It was kind of a cost of potential environmental impact from them pulling water directly out of the lake. That location on Route 4 obviously went away with DOT road reconstruction of that area. That was a couple of years ago, and since that time, those bulk water haulers have been filling at a fill station in Lewiston. So we had planned on having a new fill station put in Auburn and Lewiston, but Auburn, as Mike said at our last meeting, doesn't have a location for that, so they were in support of allowing Lewiston to use that half of the $21,000, which would have been Auburn's, to use that total to put in a new fill station. So that's the plan, as long as you
Did
know,
we have an estimate on what it's gonna cost? I can't remember.
It's more than
it's
that.
more than
Right, I
that.
remembered it was more than that.
43,147.
Yeah,
It's pushing 55,000, I believe.
yeah,
Okay.
And we've cited at the Public Works Operations Center off from River Road. We're actually redoing the fueling island, so that's been installed. We're actually, the long-term plan is to move Public Works from where we are over to that site. So it's part of the master plan. So we're looking at large truck traffic, which currently is going through the middle of Public Works on Adam Ave. Can be very disruptive, so this spot is better, I think, for both communities in that it's safe out of, you know, where normal truck traffic is expected. It's been planned out. We're not getting into a neighborhood or a dead-end section and causing issues. It is also going to protect from, you know, backup, backflow issues. The fill station is easier than just using a hydrant, and we can account for the water use. So.
There's also the fixed cost, as they mentioned, the whatever, 55,000 to put this thing, but it's the other costs, the location. Like, I could spend the fixed cost here in Auburn, but I have no location
Right,
where,
yeah.
you know, Public Works doesn't want water hauler trucks turning around in their yard. There's no place for it anywhere else in the city where I could line up trucks to fill safely. You know, it's not easy to pull in a tractor trailer truck and turn that around somewhere. They can't pull into my shop on Court Street. It's not going to happen. So, you know, if we were to build one in Auburn somewhere, it would likely be way on the outskirts of Auburn, out past the hotel, which who's going to go out there to get water? And, you know, we then still have to run into the same thing. So being right across the river, we could send them right over there and, yeah, sure, you need water, go over here. Should be good.
I hate to even ask, but so the water usage is added to the bill that mostly get paid for it?
No. It'd be Lewiston Water at that
It's a
point.
pay station, so we have, at the fueling island, we have FOBs, so we have outside agencies from the city that fuel up there, sheriff and others. So we can actually meter and bill them in the same path. So it could be a purchase card that they tap or the FOB, but either way, it'll a prepay basic system with an account. That way there's no theft, but there is accountability where we know that's where the water went.
But they're getting the water from Lewiston's distribution system, so it's
Right.
their revenue to capture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going through their meter at the plant, so.
So I assume we need a motion to allocate this funds to the Lewiston Water Division?
Lewiston Water Division. Yep.
So moved.
There's a second from Amy. Any discussion, more discussion? All those in favor?
I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining. An abstention. Everyone else in favor? Thank you all. Thank you, Kevin, for that offer of the filling station.
Well,
I think we should give Lewiston 60% of the money.
no, we just want 50%.
Sorry.
All right. Erica, anything else?
Yes, so I just had on here, as Tracy mentioned, Mike, Danielle, and I met with Tracy yesterday to start talking about the commission budget for 2025. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We're, again, are looking at the education and outreach position and how to, you know, really, what is the full job description of that? Can we make it full-time? Danielle's going to look at our watershed management plan, our brand new watershed management plan, and look at the priority projects in that. We'll probably look at a couple of those to add into the budget for next year. I think those are really the two big changes. Everything else is kind of a routine line item, and I'm sure some costs will go up with inflation, but those will be reflected for you to review. Again, we'll have contributions from Auburn and Lewiston. We'll look at, you know, do those need to increase? So just to make you aware, we're working on that, and we'll have a draft for you to review at our next commission meeting. Mike had also requested that if we could have the draft available for his Auburn Water Trustee meeting in October. Is that right? They could take a look at it, but I would share that with you at the same time, and then we can actually go over it at our next commission meeting in November.
Last year, we didn't get the number from the commission till late in the process, so then it really showed up as an increase in our budget kind of late in the, so the earlier we can get it on the draft budget for us, the better. So.
Is the plan to have the numbers for the inspection
Yes.
plan included in that budget?
Yes, as a draft, I mean, ultimately, the commission needs to decide on the
Right.
level of funding this fall on that, so, yep.
That's all I had.
Okay.
Is part of the outreach gonna be through the schools?
It has been in the
Yep.
past, yes.
Because sometimes that's very effective.
Yep. We did work with, over the last couple of years, Lewiston schools, Aubrey schools, and then I think there were some summer, I don't know if they were internship or camp groups with Lewiston as well, so we definitely tried to get both sides of the city. We need to get in the upper watershed. We've been up to Hebron before, but we do try to get all of the communities, and then we had the school focus, but then we also tried to get the adult population focus too.
Is that, I was just thinking in my mind in terms of education, does this include, for instance, in Turner? I mean, in other watershed towns?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the septic inspection stuff, input from upstream, from Turner and Minot and like that, I mean, it does have an impact, even though it does have to go through the basin. I realize the basin ends up being a mitigating factor. But is the intent ultimately to expand this, to include those other areas that are direct input to the watershed?
And that's definitely
been
something we've
discussed.
talked about, we can't force these other towns to adopt the same ordinances that Auburn has, but we can certainly schedule meetings with them, sit down with them, show them what Auburn's doing, and then figure out, how we could work with them to maybe consider adopting the same protections that we're doing. So that's definitely something we've been trying to navigate, and it's been hard because up until just a few weeks ago, these weren't adopted and finalized, and how can we ask these other towns to do this if we're not even doing it here? So now that this city has finalized these, now we can take that next step to start meeting with the upper watershed towns and presenting to them and educating them on what we're doing.
And
So,
we
yeah.
talked about that before, Mike
Yep.
Turner specifically.
Yep.
So I think certainly it makes sense that now that we have the go-ahead, that we
Get that going.
meet with them, and I assume we'll be part of that. So
Yep.
when you reach out to Kershaw.
Now that we're back up to full staff, it's helpful. It's
Yeah.
easier to make these things happen.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So yeah.
Yep.
I would assume that from an agricultural standpoint, there's much more acreage in those upstream towns than there is in Auburn.
I think Auburn has the lion's share of the watershed. There's very, Turner has the next largest piece, but the other three towns that Glenn represents are very small in comparison to,
The map
So-
in the.
yeah, they're very, very small.
Also, Bruce, I would say that part of Turner also drains into Townsend Brook and not just the basin.
Right,
So just, that is a little bit bigger watershed than just that.
right.
If you want those acreages, total watershed area is about 11,300 acres, of which 7,700, roughly 7,800 is in Auburn. Of that, 2,300 is the lake itself. So there's about 5,500 acres of land area in Auburn in the watershed. Ballpark numbers.
Thank you.
Out of about 11,000 total.
Yes. Well, plus the 2,300 acres of the lake.
Yeah.
So there's 7,800 roughly total in Auburn.
Okay. Next one is the Septic Inspection Program Subcommittee.
Yeah, I know we, threw me for a loop, John, coming to the meeting tonight, but I think that's great, get it straight from them. Our first task of the subcommittee was to explain the ordinances to the commission, but why not get it straight from him?
Yeah.
I do want to, gonna chat with Danielle about what we've got so far, and then see if we can pull together an agenda and set up our first meeting with that subcommittee and get that going in the next couple of weeks would be good, because there's a lot of moving pieces to start figuring out here, especially because we're trying on the back end to pull the budget together. So it'd be good to get those things going. So yeah, we will most likely be meeting in the next week or so.
And our takeaway from the ordinance, as it was written, is that the commission was not responsible for this inspection program.
Right, it's not in, it's, because they couldn't order us, as Steve was. Yep. Okay, new business. Is there any new business report? Hearing none. Other business?
If it's not new, it's other.
Yeah, exactly. So our next regular meeting would be on November 13th. Unless there is some reason that comes up prior to that we need to meet, which would be October 9th, we will plan to meet November 13th. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved by Amy, seconded by Kevin. All those in favor?
I just got back.
Thank you all for coming.